know that most of what you've seen, read, or heard about Billy the Kid is untrue? My name is Gale Cooper. I'm a medical doctor and forensic psychiatrist. My specialty is murder case consultation for the defense. For 20 years, I've used my expertise to uncover the real Billy the Kid. Researching over 40,000 pages of archival documents and books, I've written the revisionist history. It's shocking, it's liberating, and I've written books demolishing the hoaxes, hijacking the history. My talks will share with you what I've found. Cover-ups, misinformation, and fakery, to use Old West lingo, will bite the dust. This talk is about New Mexico Territory's freedom fights. It's central to my revisionist history of Billy the Kid. The information is from my book, The Santa Fe Ring versus Billy the Kid, The Making of an American Monster. Democracy hung in the balance in New Mexico Territory in the 1870s as citizens resisted the rapacious political cabal known as the Santa Fe Ring. Freedom fights blazed while the ring escalated terrorism to defeat them. The Lincoln County War was last and bloodiest. Its loss meant tyranny's victory. A separate talk will cover ring co-bosses Thomas Benton Catron and Stephen Benton Elkins. Noted here is that they founded their ring in 1866 after coming to New Mexico Territory from Missouri. Their racist scheme was to steal Hispanic residents' huge land grants. Congress had left grant holders vulnerable by forcing proof of ownership and boundaries. Catron and Elkins, as their lawyers, tricked them into selling their land for a pittance to themselves or to cronies. Catron and Elkins also infiltrated territorial government to back these crimes, and they infiltrated judgeships to maliciously prosecute adversaries. By the 1870s, their victims' sole recourse was rebellion. In 1872 was what I named the Legislature Revolt. In 1876 was the Grant County Rebellion. In 1877, the Colfax County War peaked. In 1878 was the Lincoln County War. All were crushed. Washington turned a blind eye. The ring won. No ringite was ever punished. But their victims left documentation that can still bring history's judgment. The 1872 Legislature Revolt was first. Fittingly, it was in Santa Fe, in the legislature, the seat of Democratic power. The Republican Santa Fe Ring already controlled the governors. By 1869, Boss Elkins influenced President Ulysses S. Grant to appoint William Anderson Pyle from Missouri. In his scandal-filled tenure, Governor Pyle empowered Catron and Elkins as Attorney General and U.S. Attorney, respectively. In 1871, Grant made Marsh Giddings of Michigan governor. A ring loyalist, he taxed land grants to aid ring takeovers by bleeding owners. With Catron, he started the ring's ploy of calling opponents outlaws. He precipitated the Legislature Revolt. At the December 7th start of the 1871-72 legislative session, Democrats controlled the council. They were poised to gain the House of Representatives. That would stifle the fledgling ring. In December of 1871, they first passed bills for Silver City's incorporation and Grant County's public school system. Then came the challenge. On December 30th, the Council and House passed by large majorities redistricting of ring-biased judges. That attack centered on Judge Joseph G. Palin. He was the ring's weapon for malicious prosecutions and shielding of cronies. He was to be transferred from Santa Fe's 1st Judicial District to remote 3rd Judicial District. That would also end his being the Supreme Court's Chief Justice. Subsequently, legislator August Kirchner sent an affidavit to the Federal Judiciary Committee stating that Catron and Elkins tried to use him to bribe legislators to leave Palin undisturbed. On January 4th of 1872, Governor Giddings vetoed the Democrats' bills by lying that those legislators had no power to reassign judges. On January 5th, to block Democrats overriding Giddings' illegal veto, Ringites faked a Republican majority by adding names of 4 absent Taos legislators. On January 9th, Ringites tried to end and void the session. On January 10th, the 4 Taos men arrived, but the ring dared not risk a real vote, so Ringite House Speaker Milnor Rudolph illegally ended the session. The Democrat majority objected. Rudolph adjourned the House. He walked out, taking 10 legislators with him. Note that Ringite Rudolph, in 9 years, would be president of Billy Bonney's coroner's jury, dictating to the jurymen praise of Pat Garrett for killing him. That day, January 10, 1872, began the Legislature Revolt. Outrage at Rudolph's illegal ending of the session to shield the ring started it. Democrats claimed that his leaving left a vacancy, so they elected as Speaker Silver City mine developer John R. Johnston. They then directed the Santa Fe County Sheriff to arrest and bring back the departed legislators for a quorum. Arrested and returned were Milnor Rudolph and 2 others. The next day, January the 11th, Ringites retaliated. Governor Giddings and Milnor Rudolph, still calling himself Speaker, declared anarchy and rebellion. The majority of legislators backed John Johnson, so Catron and Elkins bribed them to back Rudolph's house and to shield Judge Palin. On January 12th, Giddings brought troops from Fort Marcy into the legislature. They seized Speaker Johnson. Chief Justice Palin called in Santa Fe's U.S. Marshal and his deputies. They escorted Milnor Rudolph to the Speaker's chair. January of 1872's Denver Rocky Mountain News described the actions as, quote, unparalleled in the history of Western politics. Federal troops had been stationed in the halls of the territorial legislature to assure control by the Santa Fe Ring, a political and economic clique, close quote. And Council President Don Diego Archuleta, exposing the racist core of the ring, cried futilely, before we submit to such despotic action on the part of the executive, the Mexican people had better be placed upon reservations as the Indians are now. We had better resign our seats than to beg our rights of the newly fledged governor who seeks to overawe us and force us to obedience to his despotic will by the presence of U.S. bayonets. Next, Catron, as Attorney General, filed writs of habeas corpus in the Supreme Court to free Rudolph and the 2 other arrested legislators, and he called an emergency Supreme Court session for their case. Fake Speaker Milnor Rudolph then suspended the legislature pending the Supreme Court's decision. On January 22nd, The Supreme Court convened. Present were troops and the sheriff for intimidation. The court ignored its limited habeas corpus issue. Instead, it declared null and void all Democratic legislation of the session. Republicans then passed a resolution expunging from the record and nullifying all proceedings of the Democratic legislators. On February 28th, Giddings castrated the rebellious legislators. By a gerrymandering proclamation, he halved their numbers from anti-ring Grant, Doña Ana, and Lincoln counties. Ringites recognized the Legislature Revolt's danger. The next year, in 1873, writing to the Department of Interior, Giddings called the revolt that terrible war and one of the most reckless revolutionary efforts made anywhere. And its successful suppression began the Ring's patterns of bribery, abuse of executive and judicial power, and using troops for terrorism. And never again would an uprising be called a revolution. Opponents became so-called lawless outlaws. Opened was the door to murder. In 1876 was the Grant County Rebellion. Formed in 1868, Grant County was named after Ulysses S. Grant. It occupied the southwestern corner of New Mexico Territory. To the west, it bordered Arizona Territory. Only 50 miles from the border was Silver City, its mining-rich county seat, founded in 1870. The Santa Fe Ring clutched Grant County from its inception. Its district court in 1868 had bossed Thomas Benton Catron himself as its district attorney. The Grant County Rebellion was rooted in simmering resentment going back to the 1872 Legislature Revolt. Its illegally voided acts had stopped Grant County's self-governing incorporation of Silver City and its taxation to create a public school system. Silver City's John Johnson, the legal speaker, had been manhandled by troops and cast out, and Governor Giddings had halved their legislatures to hobble them. It's possible that Billy Bonney himself heard anti-ring grumblings when living in Silver City from 1873 to 1875. On August 8, 1875, the Grant County Herald reported the wish to secede from the territory to escape the Ring's political vassalage. The actual Grant County Rebellion intentionally coincided with the American Revolution centennial. On September 16, 1876, the Grant County Herald published a contemplated political change. A citizens' meeting was announced to discuss annexation to Arizona Territory. At the October 4th Grant County annexation meeting, legislator John M. Ginn was elected presiding officer. An elected committee of 5 then authored the Grant County Declaration of Independence. The independence was from the Santa Fe Ring. A committee of 8 was elected to write for Congress the memorial for annexation. On October 7th, the Grant County Herald printed in full the Grant County Declaration of Independence. It stated, "We, the citizens of Grant County here assembled, having met pursuant to said call, do hereby declare it is our earnest wish to join our political destinies with the neighboring territory of Arizona and cease our political connection with the territory of New Mexico. And for taking this important step, we assign the following as some of the principal reasons for the desired change." Included was, quote, "We have little or no voice in the enactment of laws which are necessary to our welfare, which we believe would be remedied by the liberal-minded people of Arizona. we consider the territory of New Mexico badly governed, owing to the fact that the chief power in the territorial legislation rests in the hands of a selfish oligarchy who designedly wield the same in their own selfish interest. And we see no hope for relief in the near future. It ended, resolved that it is the wish of the people of Grand County, as expressed through the persons here assembled, that the necessary steps be taken at once to further that view herein expressed. On November 7th, Grand County voted almost unanimously for annexation. On January 3, 1877, Arizona Territory's governor, APK Safford, seconded the annexation. Then national politics collided. November 1876's presidential election was won by Republican Rutherford B. Hayes. Hayes opposed Democratic Arizona's getting mine-rich Grand County. So, when the Arizona representative introduced the resolution for annexation to Congress, it was referred to the Committee on Territories, where it was killed. No one knew that Hayes was entangled with the Santa Fe Ring. The rebellion deflated. Grand County retreated into non-intervention as ring rampages escalated in other parts of the rebelling territory. That emboldened ring-eyed Governor Samuel Beach Axtell in office for a year to implement the ring's growing brutality to stamp out resistance. The next year, 1877, the Colfax County War peaked in the north. Its anti-ring uprisings spanned 1873 to 1887 without a central battle, but with 200 people killed. But 1877 had an outburst of anti-ring press exposés, petitions, and complaints to the Hayes administration. And the ring perfected strategies for tyranny: assassination, malicious prosecution, shielding of its criminals by obstructing courts, and using troops against civilians. As background, T.B. Catron and S.B. Elkins cheated Lucien Bonaparte Maxwell out of his 2-million-acre Maxwell land grant in 1870, but its settlers remained. Catron and Elkins intended the land for mining, timber, coal, agriculture, grazing land, and railroad passageway over its Raton Pass, and they planned to sell land to new settlers. The grant was immediately sold to their speculator friends. They in turn sold it to British investors as the Maxwell Land Grant and Railway Company. Ring-eyed Governor William Pyle assisted the filing. That 1870, Elkins also increased Catron's power by resigning as U.S. Attorney so Catron could take the position. On April 17, 1871, Governor Pyle assisted Elkins by a proclamation sending troops to evict Grant settlers resisting takeover of their land. In 1872, the grant was bought by Dutch investors. Elkins was president of their board of directors. Catron was their attorney. That year, Elkins used ring-eyed Governor Marsh Giddings to send troops against the settlers. To reduce their political power, the county seat was moved to Cimarron, where the Grant Company was headquartered. In 1873, the Dutch company hired 26-year-old Raymond Morley from Iowa, chief construction engineer of the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad, as their vice president to develop that train's route into New Mexico. He brought his wife, Ada McPherson Morley. They were housed in the company's headquarters, the Maxwell family's prior mansion. Surprisingly, Raymond Morley became anti-ring. He sympathized with the Grant settlers, whose rioting had become the Colfax County War. In 1874, Morley and his attorney friend, Frank Springer, founded the anti-ring Cimarron News and Press, with local anti-ring leader Reverend Franklin J. Tolby. They anonymously exposed Catherine Elkins, Judge Joseph Palin, and Land Grant Company directors Robert Longwill and Melvin Mills as ringites in articles for the New York Sun. By 1875, the Ring retaliated. It began with Boss Catherine's favorite tactic of malicious prosecution. He targeted Morley's wife, Ada. In early 1875, her firebrand mother, Mary Tibbles McPherson, had come from Iowa and became inspired by Reverend Tolby. So she mailed an anti-ring letter to Washington at Cimarron's post office. Scared of repercussions, Ada took it from the post office box. The ringite postmaster reported Ada to Catherine. As U.S. Attorney, he federally indicted her for mail theft, but he left her arrest in abeyance as torture. Catherine had bigger fish to fry. On September 14, 1875, Reverend Franklin Tolby, on horseback, was assassinated on a remote road, mirroring John Tunstall's ring murder in 3 years. Catherine's agent were the Grant Company directors Melvin Mills and Robert Longwill, who used local thugs for the crime. Anti-ring leadership was assumed by Tolby's assistant, Reverend Oscar P. McMains. He identified the killers. As would be repeated in Lincoln County's Tunstall murder, the murderers were shielded by the ringite sheriff. But one of the two actual killers exposed the plot, so he was murdered before testifying. And ringite Governor X.B. Axtell sent troops to Cimarron to intimidate the outraged citizens. Killer Robert Longwill escaped to Santa Fe to Catherine's protection, and the ring launched an outlaw myth. November 16, 1875's ringite Santa Fe Weekly New Mexican reported, "Anarchy in Cimarron." It wrote, "There seems to be an armed band of men in and about town bent on violence, lawlessness, and ruling to suit themselves." But Catherine failed. His attack on Ada McPherson Morley did not stop her husband Raymond Morley's exposés, and her mother, Mary Tibbles McPherson, increased her efforts to expose the ring, and the settlers kept on rioting. On December 16, 1875, the New York Sun published an anonymous anti-ring article about Reverend Tolby's murder. It exposed the ring as organized crime. By Raymond Morley, it was titled "The Territory of Elkins, the Murder of the Reverend F.J. Tolby in New Mexico." It stated, "The political revolution which has taken place and is still in progress in this territory is mainly attributed to the exposures of the Santa Fe ring, which have appeared in the Sun and which have created great consternation among our corrupt officials. By means of libel suits and still more effectual measures, the ring has succeeded in intimidating the local press, with one or two exceptions, and so long as the courts are constituted as they are at present, it is absolutely unsafe for any man to actively oppose the corrupt scheme of the ring. The nature of the means taken to harass those who show rebellious spirit has already been described in this correspondence. On the 14th of September last, the Reverend F.J. Tolby, a minister of the gospel, generally respected and beloved, was brutally murdered on the highway while passing through a lonely canyon. It is said that a few days before his death, Mr. Tolby had a warm discussion with Judge Palin of the 1st Judicial District, one of the chiefs of the ring. At last, the actual murderers were hunted down, and when it was found that they implicated the principal members of the Colfax County branch of the ring as the instigators of the crime, the indignation of the people knew no bounds. Their names are R.H. Longwell, probate judge, and M.W. Mills, member of the legislature. The feeling against all persons who are supposed to be connected in any way to the operation of Elkins and Company is bitter in the extreme. On the 10th of November, a mass meeting of the citizens of Colfax County was held in the courthouse in Cimarron. The Reverend O.P. McMahon presided, and resolutions were adopted that the killing of Mr. Tolby was a deliberately planned assassination in which the actual murderers were the tools of other parties who planned the murder, and those who procured the murder are far more guilty, if possible, than the duped and hired tools, and that, if satisfactory evidence is found to discover and identify any such party or parties, there should not be permitted to them any loophole to escape the extreme penalty of the law. If a new election for delegate to Congress could be held for tomorrow, Elkins would be defeated by such a tremendous majority that not even the tools of the Santa Fe ring would dare attempt the job of counting him in. By 1876, the ring escalated repression. On January 14th, the Maxwell Land Grant Company, using Governor Axtell, petitioned to force settlers to buy or rent their land with eviction for refusal. The same day, Axtell abolished Colfax County's courts. He transferred them to distant and inaccessible Taos County. He also barred Colfax County citizens from being on Taos juries. Colfax County witnesses in litigation had to travel over a mountain range to Taos. Intended was obstructing Franklin Tolby's murderers' trials to snuff out the Colfax County War. Within days, Raymond Morley, Frank Springer, businessman Henry M. Porter, and rancher Clay Allison requested a meeting with Governor Axtell in Cimarron. Frank Springer also went to Santa Fe to meet with Axtell to request that visit. Axtell's response that January of 1876 heralded his Lincoln County War brutality and outlawing. Springer recounted, he said there were bad men in Cimarron and that he intended to have them punished or compelled to leave the county if it took all the troops in New Mexico. The ring was poised for murder. Morley, Springer, Porter, and Allison were next. In what became called the Deer Bend plot, in March of 1876, Axtell colluded with Ringite 2nd Judicial District Judge Benjamin Steffens. Steffens came to Cimarron with a telegram to lure the victims. He also had a secret telegraph directions from Axtell. Steffens, knowing Morley, invited him to the local St. James Hotel. He gave him the lure telegram. It stated that Axtell was coming by that Saturday's coach for a secret meeting with him, Springer, Allison, and Porter about the Colfax County courts. In fact, Axtell was not coming. The victims were to be met by Fort Union's troops, who would kill them. The twisted logic was that hot-headed Allison would react violently and justify the shootings of all as self-defense. But Morley was warned of the plot, likely by the telegraph operator who got Axtell's secret telegraph to Benjamin Steffens. It was to Dear Ben. It said, "Have your men placed to arrest him," that meant Clay Allison, "and to kill all the men who resist you or stand with those who do resist you. Our man, that was Allison, signed the invitation with others who were at that meeting for me to visit Colfax. Porter, Morley, Springer, and Howell. Now, if they expect me Saturday, they will be on hand. Send me letters by messenger, and do not hesitate at extreme measures. Your honor is at stake now, and a failure is fatal. Morley warned the others, so the plot failed. Not included in the Dearborn plot was actually the most dangerous of the Colfax County freedom fighters, the breathtakingly brave and bold Mary Tibbles McPherson. Sexist underestimation apparently spared her. Meanwhile, she wrote the most important documents in existence, exposing the Santa Fe Ring. She stayed in Cimarron from 1875 through 1876. She then continued her anti-ring fight in Washington, D.C. Her writings remove any doubt that President Hayes and his administration knew about the ring, its members, and its crimes. She demanded removal from office of U.S. Attorney Catron, Territorial Delegate Elkins, Governor X.B. Axtell, Judge Warren Bristol, and Chief Justice Henry Waldo. Had she succeeded, the Lincoln County War would not have happened. In fact, the 1878 Lincoln County investigations of Frank Warner Angel were structured to cover up her proof that U.S. officials were behind murder. And when Angel covertly sought to pit new Governor Lew Wallace against the ring, he supplied Wallace with McPherson's magnificent typeset booklet of 1877 covering everything. Mary McPherson began her onslaught by attacking boss Catron. He was then maliciously prosecuting her daughter, Ada, for fake mail theft. On February 7, 1877, McPherson complained to Attorney General Alphonso Taft. She included the murder of Reverend Tolby. She titled her exposé, Charges Against Thomas B. Catron, U.S. Attorney, and Others. She wrote, I wish to bring to your attention the sufferings of the people of New Mexico. In searching out the assassins, the evidence pointed strongly to U.S. officials. All U.S. officers out there are in league together, and the people are the sufferers. Catron himself fired back with a letter to Taft that she was, quote, a crazy person, that outlaws had taken over Colfax County, and that territorial courts were free of politics. As Ring Head, that liar, hissed, it is utterly false that the U.S. officials in this territory are in any manner engaged together so that the people are sufferers, or that there is any combination among them for any purpose whatever. McPherson's complaint was ignored. Mary McPherson was next forced to use an attorney for her Washington complaints. On May 1, 1877, adding one, she submitted her charges against New Mexican officials together with corroboration evidence, and included a petition to remove Judge Bristol and 2 lists of charges against S.B. Axtell, Governor of New Mexico. It had a cover letter to President Hayes and extensive evidence and charges. She spelled out the ring's organized crime. She asserted, quote, the United States District Attorney Thomas B. Catron, Associate Justice Warren Bristol, Henry L. Waldo, Chief Justice, Samuel B. Axtell, Governor, and others of the said territory to them unknown, have conspired together to corrupt and defraud justice and defeat the ends thereof, both by fraudulent and illegal practices in their respective districts and offices, and by procuring the passage of insidious legislative enactments. It is in evidence that for several years these parties have been in collusion in a general plan having for its aim the centralizing of power, the reduction of large and valuable private grants of land within the territory to their personal use and benefit by corrupt territorial and congressional enactments, and by passage of bills of attainment and de facto laws depriving the citizens of due process of law. To accomplish these purposes, this ring so formed appears to have paused at nothing, however difficult or questionable. McPherson's goal was to, quote, respectfully request their removal from office. On May 3, 1877, McPherson added to her complaint to Hayes, she got corruption's favorite tactic, stonewalling. On July 26, 1877, McPherson made an open records request to Secretary of the Interior Carl Schurz. She wanted records pertaining to her charges versus Governor S.B. Axtell in connection with the Santa Fe Ring, including S.B. Elkins and Thomas B. Catron as U.S. Attorneys of New Mexico. Stonewalled, on August 23, 1877, she tried to contact Attorney General Charles Devens. She was stonewalled. But her charges were forwarded to ring-eyed Governor Axtell. He denied them. Unfazed, in August of 1877, Mary McPherson wrote the best contemporary exposure of the Santa Fe Ring. She dispensed with the attorney. It is a 31-page typeset booklet. She titled it In the Matter of Charges versus Governor S.B. Axtell and Other New Mexico Officials, submitted to the Departments of the Interior and Justice. It could have prevented the Lincoln County War, and it heralded its atrocities. For it, McPherson distilled her past complaints to expose the ring, its fraudulent land grant grabs, its murder of Franklin Tolby, and its suppression of the settlers by removing their courts. She wrote, that there has existed in Santa Fe for several years past a ring is now beyond question. That this ring has by its power and influence controlled all the offices, revenues, and courts of the territory, and that they have used this power to oppress, intimidate, and plunder the people, cannot now be denied. She accused Catron and Elkins of having, quote, the courts of New Mexico manipulated by the ring to get just such decisions as they wanted to complete this general land steal or partition of other men's property among themselves. She covered the ring's malicious prosecutions, briberies, vote fixings, removal of Colfax County courts to shield Reverend Franklin Tolby's murderers, and criminal acts of Governor Axtell. She added the petition to remove Judge Warren Bristol. She concluded with truth that heralded the Lincoln County War revolution. And if the government allow ringmen to retain their place in power in the face of this showing, it deserves to have its authority defied. She was stonewalled. Unbeknownst to Mary McPherson, ringites had no problem getting the ear of President Hayes. On June 11, 1877, Territorial Delegate S.B. Elkins wrote to him in support of Governor Axtell. He called McPherson's charges absolutely false. He added the ring's all-purpose outlaw myth. He wrote, the charges are preferred by irresponsible parties, now residents, who have no interest in the territory, and to satisfy a few bad people to whom I'm informed the governor gave offense in attempting to repress violence and murder. As a citizen of New Mexico deeply interested in her welfare and as a friend of your administration, I beg to record my protest. So nothing was done by the Hayes administration. The Colfax County War simmered on. Franklin Tolby's murderers went unpunished. By 1878, Elkins's and Catron's land grab vision was realized. The Raton Pass of the Maxwell Land Grant along the old Santa Fe Trail was bought by the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad to run its tracks from Colorado to New Mexico Territory. So it was inevitable that on February 18, 1878, the ring assassination of its adversary, John Tunstall, went unpunished. So it was inevitable that on July 19, 1878, the last day of the Lincoln County War battle, that the ring's use of troops to murder Alexander McSween, Francesco Zamora, Vincente Romero, and Harvey Morris went unpunished. By the end of 1878, President Hayes faked action for Lincoln County War atrocities by removing Governor Axtell. By 1879, Raymond and Ada Morley fled Cimarron and New Mexico Territory. On July 13, 1882, removed Axtell was reinstated as New Mexico's territorial Chief Justice by the Senate Judiciary Committee. And by April 18, 1887, by federal Supreme Court decree, the ring achieved eviction of all Maxwell Land Grant settlers. There was no justice whatsoever. The Colfax County War clinched the ring's blueprint for unbeatable organized crime: control the governor, legislature, courts, and law enforcement, conduct malicious prosecution for intimidation, use the outlaw myth to invalidate adversaries, remove legal redress to shield members from prosecution, enlist troops for suppression, hire thugs for assassinations, expurgate incriminating documents, and use Washington's protection. But this perfect tyranny had an Achilles heel. It had to remain secret. The ring almost achieved that too. The Legislature Revolt, the Grand County Rebellion, and the Colfax County War were forgotten. But in August of 1877, when Mary McPherson wrote her damning booklet on the ring, a rough teenager just renamed by himself as Billy Bonney dashed from Arizona Territory to New Mexico Territory on a stolen racehorse. He had just killed a bullying blacksmith in self-defense. By the next month, he was riding with ring thug Jesse Evans and his boys as just another gunman. But this kid was destined to drag the ring into the glare of insatiable international curiosity about his life and his death, till their crimes could become common knowledge, till their condemnation was finally possible, and till the forgotten freedom fighters could be honored. The Lincoln County War, which Billy Bonney made famous, will be in a talk of its own.